Welcome to Legends and Leaders, Biographies Everyone Should Know, narrated and conceptualized by Miss Rennu. Learning about influential figures is very critical as we live in a world which has been impacted by their contributions. Without their struggles, without their triumphs, we would not be where we are. These short podcast stories simply serve as a reminder that greatness comes not just from fame, but from perseverance, vision, and the courage to make a difference. Be sure to listen to all the amazing people we talk about. You will be inspired. Today, we're going to learn about the journey of George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was born a slave in Diamond, Missouri. A slave is a person who's owned by someone else. Can you believe it? Being owned by someone else? The owner can make the slave work for no pay. In the early history of the United States, white people in the South brought black people from Africa and forced them to work on their farms. When these slaves had children, their birth dates were not always written down. And this is why there is a C before the birth date or the time of period when a person lived. It stands for circa, which means about. George Washington Carver was born about 1864 and he lived till 1943. Shortly after he was born, his father was killed in an accident and his mother was kidnapped. George was raised by his owners. In 1865, when George was 1 year old and Abraham Lincoln was president, slavery was abolished or ended. But the people who owned George continued to raise him. They taught him to read and write. As a child, George loved plants. When he grew up, he went to college and studied agriculture, the science of farming. But it was very hard for African Americans to go to college then because many colleges did not accept black people. George Washington Carver used to work at different jobs to pay for his education. When he was 32 years old, he was asked to teach at the Tuskegee Institute, a college for African Americans. He taught agriculture students how to grow more plants on their land. Although he liked teaching, George Washington Carver preferred scientific research more. He liked to look at plants and ask, what would happen if, what would happen if this, what would happen if that? In other words, he asked many questions. George Washington Carver experimented with peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soybeans in his laboratory. He discovered more than 300 different products, including ink, soap, and a milk substitute that could be made from peanuts alone. George Washington Carver was given many prizes for his research. Toward the end of his life, George gave much of his money he had earned to the Tuskegee Institute so that other scientists could work and study there too. Today we heard the journey about George Washington Carver and his innovative research at Tuskegee Institute focused on sustainable farming practices, introducing alternatives to cotton like peanuts and sweet potatoes, which enrich soil and diversified agriculture. Carver's efforts not only revolutionized southern farming, but also helped struggling farmers improve their livelihoods. His legacy is one of resilience, creativity, and a deep commitment to the environment, conservation, and education. I hope this podcast motivates you to become a leader, leaving a legacy like him. Let's move on to the next podcast.